Hey there, YouTubers. Right, so in this video, we're revising my what have I learned about Intel's 13th gen CPUs, or maybe in some aspects this is everything you need to know about 13th gen CPUs, to include the motherboards. So let's go ahead and get into it, folks. Yours truly has an i5 13600KF. I had the i7 13700K. I wanted something more powerful, right, and to create even more headaches for me, so I bought the i9 13900KF, which is pretty incredible, I must say. All right, so let's talk about motherboards. When you are shopping, folks, the first thing you need to understand is if you're buying a 600 series motherboard, you are going to need a BIOS update. All right. So, what does that boil down to? You may be required to buy a 12th gen CPU to update the BIOS to get you to 13th gen. That adds about $60. So some of these motherboards, you're just better off going and buying a Z790. And as I say there, 700 series appears to have less headaches. So that boils down to having a BIOS that'll get you running, as well as the BIOS has been properly tuned, I'll say, to support those 13th gen. Now, the 600 series, you're probably going to have a lot more headaches, to include obviously getting the BIOS update done. How do you do that? Well, one is, using a 12th gen CPU. So if you're already using 12th gen with 600, hey, that's going to work out fine for you, except, some of the BIOS settings may need adjustment when you get that 13th gen in there. Now, if you're looking, at a Z690, H670, or B660, I'd suggest looking for one that has the ability to have the BIOS updated via USB without a CPU or GPU installed. So let's talk about that a little more. We didn't really talk about that in the prior video, all right? So in a really awesome video that I made, and I will say so, only has 353 views, so you guys need to watch this, get that up there. And I need to go back and like my own video. I can see here, but in this video, I update the BIOS without a CPU or GPU for the Aorus Elite Z690 AX D5 motherboard, and that includes also not even putting RAM in here, right? We did not need this power switch hooked up over here. I'm not even sure I need the CPU power connector connected, but I'll put that on there anyways. And then there is a 24 pin power connector coming from your PSU to power up the power supply. So not shown you need the power supply that all these cables are hooked up to. You'll need obviously to plug that thing into the wall, and it'll need to be on. What else do you need? Well, as I show you in this video, you'll go to the manufacturer's website, you'll download the BIOS, and for a gigabyte you have to rename the BIOS shown in that video. All right, you'll rename it and put it on a USB that is formatted for FAT32. Okay, supposedly only FAT32 works. You will then put that in the correct BIOS, USB slot, which I can't remember which one it is on here. I think it's over here. That one is dedicated to use a BIOS update only. All right. Well, I shouldn't say only, but it is meant for the BIOS update. Now, once you put that in, and this thing has power, all right, but not necessarily, we haven't turned anything on. We've just powered up the power supply, okay? Once that's done, you'll click on this BIOS update button. It'll flash for a while, up to 8 to 10 minutes, and then you'll have an updated BIOS when that is done. All right, so if you can't get a Z690, folks, that is the second less headache version, I would say, if you don't have a 12th gen already. Now, I may say it on the next page, but expect, if you're buying one of these 600 series motherboards, it's going to take 6 months to 12 months for most of those to get out of circulation, to have been bought. So that, you're waiting for new stock that has the updated BIOS. It could take up to a year. if you're buying on eBay, you know, there's a concern there that you may buy a, even 2 years from this video, that you may get a motherboard that has a really old BIOS. So keep that in mind. Now, as noted, Z790 is expensive, right? I think, price wise, anywhere from 20 to at least $60 more when you compare the 12th gen Z690 to the Z790s, okay? Avoid lower end motherboards, especially avoid the H610M. That is the worst of the worst motherboards, and why you would buy a really expensive CPU and buy this motherboard, I will not understand why people would do that. But if I still had an H610, I'd probably stick one in just to show you guys. Now, of course, you're going to expect low quality VRMs, non-existent heat sinks, or weak power stages. Let's go on to the next page. And obviously, folks, I'm using PowerPoint here. This just works out great. I'm not in presentation mode. I like to be able to, jump around on the side here. So, motherboards, continued. All right, what do we say here? Requires a solid motherboard if you want to use all its benefits. Now, I would say B660s that start at 160 price range. When I made this, that is probably where you want to be at, right? But now you can find them at $140. So these prices are dropping. And if you want to include eBay in there, folks, whoops, can't even spell it. eBay should be less, right? So I don't want to hit I was going to hit, say, 110, 120, but the second I hit a 2, it's going to kill this recording. So that's my hotkey for OBS, so we don't want to do that. All right, Z690s start over $200. Now, they usually are pretty well equipped. Do you have to spend that much? No. If you're on eBay, you might find a nice MSI Pro for $100 on there. Yours truly found one for $60 with some damage, and it works just fine. Z790s, as we said it, we already stated that, right? $260, better investment. Now, BIOS updates might not fix all the issues with the 600 series. So, issues may mean lower performance or significantly less Cinebench benchmarks. You can see all this stuff done on my channel with benchmarks. It is real, folks, all right? Now, if you have an Asus Z690 motherboard, you may have this problem, right? Definitely shown on this channel. Now, to get that thing to work properly, you may have to adjust core voltage or undervolt. Let me see here if I can. Nope. So there are other things that you may have to do if a future BIOS doesn't fix it. We'll report back on that hopefully down below. Some users will probably put some comments in there. Actually, let's do this. Now, I'm not sure, honestly, if this will fix the problem, but I haven't tried it yet. So I think this is, no, this is not the one I have, because all mine, the BIOS shield comes off. But all of these Asus all seem to have the same problem. All their BIOS were done and released October 19th. And like I said, there's performance issues with the 2 that I have. And until they fix those, I will not be buying another Asus motherboard. Potentially, I think I've heard comments that this may help. And maybe even updating the firmware. I don't know, but I have yet to really see a good answer for it. I'm sure some folks have made videos on it. I have not spent any time since I bought all these Gigabyte and Aorus motherboards to really mess with it. And maybe we'll update this again at some point. All right, so CPU coolers. Now I had that i5-13600kf, or I still have it, I should say. And honestly, I thought it ran well with any of the Noctua NHU14Ss, the single tower 140 millimeter, to a Noctua D14, D15. The closer you are to the D14, D15, the better off you're going to be. And you may see during benchmarks, Cinebench R23, you may see thermal throttling depending on which one you have. Now, I said even clones like the Thermalright Frost Commander. Somebody commented on one of the videos that, I don't know that they took this the same way, but when I say that, I mean Noctua came out with the D14, I think it was. So if I got this right, and I own one of these, the D14 has a 120 millimeter fan and a 140 millimeter fan in dual towers. There's also the D15 I have that's dual 140 millimeter fans and dual towers. But there is Thermalright makes some really good products, okay? And it appears they came around 4 years before Noctua, but it also appears, they've kind of copied some of Noctua's designs and to get around their patents using, my opinion, worse mounting brackets. But the CPU cooler itself appears to work just as good as the Noctua, right? So you can save quite a bit of money. Now, recommendation though, if you can fit it in, I say 280, 360, 420 AIO, and you will not have any problems with cooling, all right? But that's if you want to really overclock. So, and keep your temps even more ridiculously low during gaming. And you will expect that the benchmarks will be significantly greater than the i5-12600K. All right, CPU coolers in regards to i7-13700KF or K. So I had the 13700K. I had all kinds of issues with thermal throttling with the Cinebench R23 and air cooler. How did I solve this, folks? Well, that was with undervolting and then overclocking, undervolting as well. Got some ridiculously higher scores. And even that i5-13600kf, if I remember correctly, it produced certain scores higher than the i9-12900. Okay, so that was a $300 CPU versus a $550 CPU, and it's probably still around $500. Now, I would definitely say get the i7-13700K over the i9-12900, as this CPU is, close to $400. So much better deal, and performance is much greater. Now, between the two, if I was going to disable Turbo Boost and use one of those CPUs, I would in that case use the i9-12900 for its very low power consumption, but extremely great performance capability. That would be the only time I would choose that one over the i7-13700K. Yeah, air cooler temps are rather low during gaming, compared to benchmarks, right? Now, water cooler. So, when I did this originally, I did not have a water cooler installed, though I had a couple lying around. VTrue sent me a couple, but I honestly, even if I had the LGA 1700 kit, I did not feel like those would be sufficient. So what did we get, folks? We ended up buying the Liquid Freezer 2, or Liquid Freezer 280 millimeter AIO. Got a heck of a deal on Amazon for it. And to be honest with you, I don't think I had any more thermal throttling issues, and undervolting wasn't, something that was as important, though I may still have undervolted it. All right, CPU coolers. I9-13900kf. So what do I have here, folks? Well, we have currently installed to the I9-13900kf the Arctic Freezer 280 millimeter, right? So that's 240 millimeter fans and the radiator. But for future planning, I had also bought a Arctic Liquid Freezer 2 420 millimeter AIO, right? So I don't know that they get any bigger than that, but that thing is going to be awesome when I eventually install it. So should get some lower temps out of it. How much more? It's probably only gonna be 1 or 2 degrees, but still, it's gonna be awesome. All right, so yeah, air coolers. Don't expect that you will be able to really use an i9 air cooler with an i9, even with Noctua D14, D15. There's also lying around the house here is the Ice Giant Pro Siphon, which is a beast too, but even that is not enough for the i9, in my opinion. Now, would it be with a undervolt, which we don't discuss here? Yes, I could undervolt that to the point where it would work. And now I do believe, gaming-wise, you probably would be adequate. Noctua would be adequate if you did not care about benchmarks, and you keep those power limits in check as well, right? So I found during some of the benchmarks, I think I hit 315 watts just from the CPU. So that was a significant increase over the i7. Now I say that you should be okay with gaming with those. Definitely not going to work for benchmarks. And then obviously if you have no AC, definitely no AC in the summer. Don't even think about an air cooler. Okay. Now water coolers. So yeah, I bought the 420 millimeter AIO just for this. I'll probably at some point get a 360 as well. The price is not the greatest thing in the world, but if you want to keep that CPU cool and possibly increase its longevity, that is the way to go, folks. All right, moving on. Undervolting. All right, what does that mean? It means decrease the voltage reaching the processors and CPU with the goal of maintaining stability, right? Now, what are the benefits? So, as we have seen on the channel, it helps to cool down the CPU temp, reducing thermal throttle. This could even happen at default settings that you need an undervolt, as I found out with the i9-13900kf in the current motherboard. I was able to find a better Cinebench benchmark for the CPU by adjusting the undervolt. Now, maybe you may be able to use existing CPU cooler without upgrading, right? So that is a good thing. Now, if you don't need 100% of the power that your CPU can put out, and or you've already invested in a really nice air cooler, Noctua D14, D15, this may be your solution, which you will probably be able to, depending on the CPU, run benchmarks, or it'll just be adequate for gaming. Of course, undervolting can be done from XTU, right? When does this not allow you to do it? Well, when it's grayed out, okay? Asus motherboards, that's an example, cannot do the undervolting from inside of XTU, has to do it from the BIOS. You may find undervolting increase overall scores. I have an example video of that. Will increase overall scores if it avoids thermal throttling, right? So if you're pegging at 100 degrees Celsius, putting in a undervolt and getting yourself down to 96 degrees Celsius, you'll find the score will go up. All right, negatives to undervolting. Well, possible performance loss as well if you're not using it correctly. And yours truly does not have 20 years of undervolting experience, nor do I have a electrical or computer engineering degree. I have actually have 4 college degrees, but None of them necessarily will help, even though I have had courses in electrical engineering. But that said, if you don't use it right, you could have possible performance loss. Instability. If you go too far with an undervolt, could be blue screen. Or that undervolt in conjunction with an overclock or something else may cause your computer to crash or blue screen, okay? So just keep that in mind. And it's always smart to slowly increment. You'll see on this channel, I don't show you what I'm doing in the background. You see the actual video. So I've already screwed around with some things and have a general idea of where I need to be with the scores. All right. Now, they also say that undervolting could affect the lifespan of your components. Let's hope not, especially after I spent over $600 on the CPU frame. Now, I did not bring up a photo. I don't know why I didn't stick a photo on here. Let's see. Probably not even calling this thing the right thing, but CPU bending. So you see these things right here, right? Supposedly these work. I think some people had better success with i9-12900Ks, and I don't believe as much success with the i9-13900K, but I could be wrong. Oh, excuse me, folks. It's early here still. All right, so you may find that buying the Thermal Grizzly for $46 actually does something for you, okay? You may find if you install it incorrectly that it's not going to do anything for you. You may find that if you install it correctly, that you may see up to 8 degrees Celsius benefit, or you might not. I did a video with the i5-13600kf before and after. No change in the temperature, all right? So they may or may not be created equally. That's why I state, the price is, ranges pretty much from $12 to $46. Let me just make sure we're still recording. Okay, the long video. Sometimes these things cut out. My test of the Thermalright model exhibits no change, as I said. All right. Expensive. Yeah, CPU prices, and everything, right, is costing more. So the price of the 13th gen in comparison, to what I paid, spent at least $50 less on the i5-12600K than that. I didn't buy the i7-12700K, but it was cheaper than this. And of course, when the i9-12900K came out, it was pretty pricey, at least $550. And as I note here, when I originally did this, selling for over $700. Though recently I saw one, and this is an update, for $619. Now I paid a little bit more than that for the KF, so the fact that this was available for $619, that was the better deal. CPU coolers. Well, heck, you might figure, I can get by with a $20 CPU cooler, $50 CPU cooler. Maybe, hey, I've got a Nock 2 at D14 or D15. If you have to play with this thing and really want to mess with overclocks and that sort of thing, you're gonna have to most likely buy the water cooler, right? So, and that $150. I got lucky with my 420 and it was only like $109, if you can believe that. So, and if I buy the 360, I'll be trying to get it close to that $100-some range too. CPU frames, $14, $46. All right, Windows. I talked about this the last time I did this too. I see no significant changes in the benchmarks between Windows 10 and Windows 11 for 12th and 13th gen. Bigger YouTubers have noted this as well. So not really big deal. Don't feel like you are forced to jump up to Windows 11 if you're happy with Windows 10. All right, folks. So in summary, obviously price is more significant than the last generation. Cooling, much bigger problem this time around. Undervolting, much more necessary than previously. All right. BIOS updates, uh, much more significant issue than it was with the 12th gen in a 600 series motherboard because it was supposed to work right out of the box. Now, there was only one example there, the i9-12900kf that required a BIOS update for motherboards that had the earliest BIOS version. Still issues, in my opinion, with BIOS updates, and I'm surprised here after a month that we haven't seen more BIOS updates. As far as motherboards go, less headaches, Z790. If you decide you must pick a 600 series motherboard, look for a Gigabyte or Aorus that has the BIOS update button, and there are some MSIs that have it. Lots of other ones too. Just look around. Make sure if you are currently buying it as of say November 19, 2022, that you may really want to ensure that you get that version that can be updated without a CPU or without a graphics card. Thanks for checking out the video, folks. Please like, please subscribe.